Hi, everyone. I know the talk hasn't started yet. This is Chloe Diamond-Lenow who will be talking. I am going to ask us when we start the session to do an optional share in the chat. And since you're here early, I do want to just put the questions up so that if, I'll turn my video on too, if you were interested in participating, you have a little time to think about it and craft your answers. So the session hasn't started, but if you are willing again in the chat to share with folks, some questions I have for you are, who are you, whatever that means to you? Where are you joining from? And what is one thing that brings you joy today? How does your body feel? So really light questions, totally easily summarizable. But anything you're willing to share, I think is really beautiful. And you don't have to share that yet. In fact, it's best, I think, if we wait for everyone to arrive, because I think you can't see the Zoom chat until after folks, once you join. So that's why these are up there.
Great. Good morning, everybody. It is great to see so many people in our opening session this morning. My name is Stephanie Riddletti, and I am the director of the UW System Gender and Women's Studies Consortium and co-chair of today's conference that you're attending, which is entitled Centering Resistance, Imaginings of a New Feminist Future. And this event is co-convened by my office, the UW System Gender and Women's Studies Consortium, and the UW System Gender Gender and Women's Studies librarian. Both of our offices support gender, women's studies, and sexuality studies programs and departments across all 13 UW system campuses. And both of our offices have been a fixture and a support in this role across UW system since the 1970s. So again, my name is Stephanie Riddletti. I'll be the moderator today, and my pronouns are she, her. I come to you from a land grab university on Ho-Chunk land, and we will offer a full statement on our thoughts on land acknowledgements and how to take them to action in our next session. But we do have a link in the chat and a bibliography that Carla Strand created that we would like to share with you now. For this session, we are utilizing CART, or Communication Access Real-Time Translation Services, from the McBurney Disability Resource Center, and you can access that directly through the Zoom-enabled captioning today. So that is the real-time captioning that you will see. If you have any technical questions or need any assistance, you can raise your hand or communicate with us directly through chat. We do have this session muted for participants, but for the interactive portions in the Q&A, chat will be a good avenue for participating, and we do encourage that throughout the session. It is my honor to introduce our guest speaker today, Dr. Chloe Diamond-Lenow. Dr. Diamond-Lenow is hosting our opening workshop, which is entitled Yoga in the Women's and Gender Studies Classroom as an Embodied and Affective Pedagogy of Feminist and Queer Care. Dr. Chloe Diamond-Lenow is an assistant professor in women's and gender studies at SUNY. They teach courses about and informed by practices of queer care, including a seminar on feminist theories, practices, and methods of care, and introduction to queer studies. Dr. Diamond-Lenow's most recent research examines the politics of feminist and queer care in yoga and yoga as feminist pedagogy. They're a registered yoga teacher and have been teaching feminist, queer, and body positive yoga since 2013. So I am super excited for this workshop this morning. I think this is a fabulous way to start a conference, and I'm so happy we've all figured out how to do things like this virtually. So I am going to hand things off now to Dr. Diamond-Lenow, and I appreciate this workshop this morning and everybody who's here to participate. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Stephanie. And what a joy it is to join you all here today and to be part of this wonderful conference. I'll introduce myself a little bit more in a little bit, but I'd love to know who's in the Zoom room together today and how we're showing up for each other. So if you feel willing and able today, I'd love you to consider these questions. And again, if you feel willing and able, you can share them into the chat. So questions I have for you are, who are you, whatever that means to you, and where are you tuning in from today? What's one thing that's bringing you joy today or in life? And how does your body feel? So I know those aren't really simple questions to sum up, but I'd love if you wanted to engage in them. I'm going to go ahead and stop screen sharing for a moment so that I can also send a couple of links into the chat for y'all. These are some accessibility files with material, a script for the talk I'll be using, the slides I'll be referring to, and a sample syllabus I'll be also talking about in a little bit. And I'll also type in those questions that I have for you in the chat if that helps you to see them. And then finally, I'll type in my answers to those questions as a way of participating as well in what I'm asking you to participate in. And I'll love to see, as I introduce myself a little more, who you all are. So my name, again, is Dr. Chloe Diamond-Lenow, and my pronouns are she, they. I'm a white, fat, queer settler on unceded land from the Haudenosaunee Confederacy 5 Nations. I have dark curly hair and I'm wearing a striped V-neck shirt. I'm also an assistant professor at SUNY Oneonta, a PWI, a predominantly white institution, and I also teach yoga both virtually for the Queer Gym and in studios as well as in the classroom. So before I begin, I'd like to also take this time to thank all the conference organizers, other presenters, as well as interpreters and captioners. This has been such a rich opportunity and conference to attend. And so let's see, I know that's a lot to type in a little bit, but I'd love to see what we've got going. I know we have a lot of folks from Wisconsin. I used to live in Duluth, Minnesota. I was a visiting assistant professor at UMD for a couple of years, so right next to Superior. And thank you for those introductions. Yeah, we have another great teacher, scholar, yogi with us today, Jennifer Musiel, whose work I'll be talking actually about a little bit. Thanks for being here, Jennifer. And I'm hearing from you that your bodies feel sore, tired, we're waking up. So thanks for waking up and being here, folks from Indiana. The falling snow bringing joy. I love that. That's beautiful. We had a really rich description earlier. If folks who put in the chat before the session started want to, again, say how they're feeling. But I'm glad that people are just joyful to be here. So thank you so much for that. I'd like us to begin the session with a little meditation and gentle movement practice. Hopefully we'll have some time at the end to bookend this as well with the meditation, but I think it's really important that we can arrive here together. And so I invite you, as you feel ready, to find a comfortable seat, whatever that means for you. So maybe you're sitting in your chair. I invite you maybe to get out of your chair. You can take a seat on the ground, maybe take a pillow underneath your hips for a little support. But wherever you find a comfortable seat, I invite you to close your eyes. Yeah, close your eyes. And as you close your eyes, I invite you to take this moment to turn inwards and start to observe yourself. You don't have to change anything, but observe. Notice how you arrived here this morning. If it felt really rushed or intentional. Notice your breath without changing it. Is it short and shallow? Is it deep and long? Down in your low belly or high up in your chest? You don't have to change it, but notice. Maybe your breath reflects a little bit of how you arrived here today. And then notice your thoughts. Are they present with you here in the space you're in? Are they already projecting to some unknown future? Are you thinking about your to-do list? What's for breakfast? It's okay, just honor, just notice. And then notice your body. Take a scan from your pinky fingers to your pinky toes, from the earth to the sky, feet to crown. Notice where you feel a sense of joy and pleasure, maybe a little bit of pain. Maybe tension from how you slept last night, or the same thing that's been bothering you for the past 10 years. On your next inhale, I want you to seize control of your breath. Take the deepest, fullest breath you've taken all day, even all week. So as you inhale, draw a full breath into your low belly, into your side ribs. Pull it up into your chest, to your throat. Sip in a little bit more air, hold it at the top. And then together, an open mouth, collective exhale, sigh it out, release it out. And you can make noise, weird out your cat, your dog, your roommate, go for it. All right, one more time, just like that. So your fullest, your deepest body breath. As you inhale, filling up front to back, top to bottom, side to side, a little pause at the top and sip in just a bit more, pause there. And then open mouth to sigh out, to release out, to let go. You can seal your lips, continue with this generous inhale and exhale. I invite you here, if it's accessible in your body and it feels okay in your space, to take one hand to your heart and then one hand to the earth or something that grounds you. It could be your desk or your thigh or your cat, I don't know. But again, if it's safe, keep your eyes closed. So it's about gazing inwards with the sense of the third eye, not outwards with the two eyes. With your eyes closed, your hand on your heart and the earth or something that grounds you, I invite you to locate yourself here and now in this moment. Feeling what's beneath you and above you. So the earth below you, the sky above. Feeling into the foundations of your own home, your own body, your bones, your muscles, your tissues. Also feeling into the earth and all that it holds, its histories and its futures, where we all come from and we all return to. So in the short time we have here together today and in this life, getting really serious about what it is that we're up to. A moment to consider really who and what you're aligning yourself with in this life. And so a moment also to locate yourself between the right and the left, in a way like the sun and the moon. So feeling all those who walk beside you in this life, collective heart work. And then also feeling in between the before and the after. So all those who walk this earth before you, your ancestors, the histories that you hold and inherit, the joy and the pain. And then the future is that you can seed and build. And from this space, I invite you now to take both hands on top of your heart, again, if it's accessible for you today. And again, close your eyes and bow your chin to your chest. This way of bowing your head and pulling it down towards your heart. I invite you to set an intention here. So an intention doesn't have to be complicated, maybe just to feel deeply for this next hour in your body, not just to stay in your mind. Maybe to take deeper breaths, or maybe it's something deeper to move with this deep sense of compassion and tenderness inwards and then outwards. Or perhaps a dedication to yourself, to someone, or to something else. When you have a sense of that intention, sankalpa, whatever it is, take a full breath, pull it to your heart space and plant it there like a seed. And as you exhale, let it melt through your entire body, back to the earth, and then emanating out to the sky, to the stars, to the oceans. Relax your hands down to your body, gently open your eyes. We'll take just a few moments to move a little bit. As you're ready, I invite you to drop your right ear to your right shoulder. This might be enough for you here. You should feel gentle stretching in the left side of your throat. If you want more, you can take your right hand overhead towards your left ear for a little more generous pressure. You can stay or drop your chin slightly to your chest to feel the back of your throat open and expand. Or maybe lift your gaze slightly to the sky, feel this front space expanding. Take a moment to notice if you're clenching your jaw or your tongue. See if you can create space between your top and bottom teeth. As you're ready, if your hand is overhead, release it. Take your head back through center and switch sides. Drop your left ear to your left shoulder. Again, you can stay here, or if you want more sensation, hand overhead. Know that each side is different. What you need on one side might be different from the other. And you can stay or drop your chin slightly to your chest. You'll feel the back of your throat expand, or draw your chin slightly to the sky to open the front space. A moment to really honor here your voice, all that you have to offer. Maybe considering all the words that you've said and all that you haven't said, everything you swallow back inwards. In this capacity to speak your own truth to yourself, to feel that truth inwards. And release your hand back if it's overhead, take your head back to neutral. And then interlace your hands. So grab webbing to webbing grip in your fingers, draw your forearms together if that feels okay, and then take little circles here. So one way or the other way, maybe feeling a little pop of movement in your joints. You have all the gripping and grasping with your hands, all the writing and the typing, phone holding, and just giving a little love. Good, you can release that, shake it out. Take your hands to your thighs, again, only if it's accessible. You can always take what you need, leave what you don't from whatever I say. And then inhale, find cow in your spine. So pull your shoulders back, lift your chest, lift your gaze slightly. And as you exhale, cat in your spine, curl it in. Your chin to your chest, drop your chin down, your forehead down. Again, inhale, cow. So it's just this opening, this blossoming of your heart between your shoulders, like you're expanding to the sunrise. And then exhale, little cat in your spine, a rounded back, like you're tracing the sunset. Come back to center. Reach your arms overhead, like you're reaching up to grab the sun. It's really cloudy here where I'm tuning in New York today. And then give yourself a big old hug. So take your right arm underneath your left arm, grab for your shoulders. If it's accessible in your body, you can also take eagle arms, Garudasana arms, wrap at your palms, or keep hold of your shoulders. Like cat and cow, as you inhale, lift your elbows up, feel a little space in the back of your heart. And then as you exhale, pull your elbows down again, chin to chest. We can maybe call this shoulder flossing. One more time, inhale, lift your elbows, lift your gaze. And then exhale, drop in, gaze in. Unwind everything. Inhale, sweep your arms up to the sky. Take a big old morning stretch. And then switch sides. Take your left arm underneath. Give yourself that hug. Or you can find your eagle arms crossed at your wrists. As you inhale, lift your elbows up. Take a deep, full breath to the back of your heart. And as you exhale, pull your elbows in. So just notice, feel your body as you move. One more time. Inhale, your elbows up. Create the space. Then exhale, drop it down, pull it in. Then unwind your arms. And then again, take your hand to your heart space. And I invite you in this moment, if it feels safe and okay, to turn your camera on for just a second and to look at each other, to see who's shown up here today to be with each other in this collective heart work. And professionalism aside, I don't care if you're in your pajamas, I hope you are. I think it's a beautiful part of this. And just smile at each other and maybe wave, maybe see each other, that we're here together, breathing and beating hearts. And it's so beautiful to see each of your faces, and you can take a moment. Yeah, I feel that. To just scan through. Thanks, Rebecca. Thanks for sending that love. Yeah, so we're here together, thinking and feeling, breathing. And that's where I'd like to start from. And so hopefully we have a little more time to feel and breathe at the end of session. But I'm gonna go ahead and stop sharing my music and start sharing my screen. And I'd love if you could just give me a thumbs up that you can see that okay, so I can know that that's okay. And feel free to revert back into your cameras off. And thanks for those who keep your cameras off. It's really a reminder to practice our boundaries and to honor those. So thank you. And feel free now to share into the chat, how did that feel for you? Did that feel good? Did that feel scary? Did that feel vulnerable? I'm really interested in your perspectives throughout my talk today, or this experience together. So please keep an active chat. And again, know that you can always keep your camera off, but I'll be keeping my eye on the chat too. I'm glad, Jahan, you feel more focused and aware, surprised. Yeah, it's like I'm in this conference, we're moving. Collected, good, felt great. So glad to hear that. A refreshing way to start, yeah. I'm happy, and I hope you can move throughout. You don't have to just sit here and just look at the screen the whole time, but you might, and that's okay too. Okay, so I'd like to begin here with a moment to think about when the last time was before this that you really took an intentional deep breath, or you took really intentional organic movement in your body. And how did that feel for you? I found myself asking my students this many times over the pandemic, and I found myself asking myself these questions many times. Deep breaths anchor me, or at least they invite me into my own body, my own breath, and the moment a little more fully and completely. At the onset of the pandemic in 2020, we saw fires that swept the lungs of many continents, the beginning of a global disease that attacks our lungs, the swelling of a movement against anti-Blackness catalyzed by George Floyd's final words at the hands of Minneapolis police, "I can't breathe." It is so salient the ways in which the breath is political in this moment, our interdependence, the way so many Black and Brown people are deprived their full breath in a white supremacist settler carceral state, when breath is what carries the source of so much fear and anxiety over the past 2 years. How might the breath also emerge as a site of possibility and of potential? Arundhati Roy reflected in the aftermath of 9/11 in War Talk, saying, "Another world is not only possible. On a quiet day, I can hear her breathing." Over 20 years later, I wonder how seizing the breath, that which is in yoga considered the site of our life force, the mechanism through which energy or prana moves in, through, around, outwards, between, amongst, and within us, provides the possibilities to direct our energy otherwise. Today, I want to together consider how we might breathe life into our feminist pedagogies in the feminist studies classroom in ways that make space for the embodied, the affective, the feeling, the somatic, the body in all its knowledges. The futures I see open for the feminist studies classroom are rooted in the seeds of past feminist work. I draw inspiration from women of color feminists Bell Hooks, Audre Lorde, Gloriane Zaldua, Shuri Moraga, who insist on the body's importance as a site of knowledge, learning, and resistance to think about the possibilities of a feminist pedagogy attuned to embodiment, feeling, affect, and care. To continue to reflect on how we can, as WGS professors, students, and professionals, in Bell Hooks' words, quote, "experience education as a practice of freedom," end quote. I'm specifically interested in how yoga, as a practice that invites a focus on mindfulness and embodied knowledge and healing, can be a site for feminist pedagogy of care in the classroom. I join in my thinking a group of feminist scholar teachers interested in thinking about the possibilities of yoga and mindfulness in the classroom, particularly the WGS classroom, including Beth Barilla, Jennifer Musial, who I'm so happy to see here today. Thank you so much for being here, and Becky Thompson, among others. So as many have already discussed in this conference, the Women's and Gender Studies classroom holds many possibilities for care in terms of pedagogy, subject matter, practice, and community. There has been a renewed and intensified focus on care in the classroom, as we've seen during the pandemic. And the pandemic, as we have all seen, ruptured business as usual for the university. For the first time, it seemed like there was an overall approach to care for our students endorsed by administrators and institutions. But what did this care really look like in practice? Accessible pre-recorded lessons, lenient submission policies, cutting readings, parsing out anything not deemed essential. And much of this asset of the instructor is really at the turn of a dime. But how are we supporting our students in their full selves, and really ourselves and our full selves? Care of the body seems to be both one of the most unique and beautiful features of WGS, and yet one of the elements in which there are so many more possibilities to embrace. While much of our work in the classroom helps helps our students think about the ways in which they move around the world as bodies, how they are seen by others, disciplined by institutions and peers, I don't think we spend enough time thinking about how their bodies, our bodies, are also sites of knowledge, pain, resistance, pleasure, and joy. So much of academic life, as Bell Hooks reminds us, asks us to disregard and leave our bodies. Gloria Anzaldúa and Sherry Moraga's concept of theory in the flesh offers a roadmap, I think, to a form of radical embodiment, one that eschews a separation between the thinking mind and the feeling body. Theory in the flesh, they write, quote, means one where the physical realities of our lives, our skin color, the land, the concrete we grew up on, our sexual longings, all fuse to create a politic born out of necessity, end quote. And so while we as feminist teachers may resist the mind-body split by insisting on the lived and embodied experiences as part of our everyday study, we may rarely turn this optic towards our lives and teaching in the classroom, to live and teach theory in the flesh. Feminist pedagogy often makes space for students to articulate their experiences as systems of power, but how often do we ask them to feel these systems of power and experiences in their bodies and our bodies? While we may challenge this Cartesian split of mind-body, we can cultivate more tools, I think, to actively challenge the binary in our classrooms by teaching to and through the body, not just as that which moves within the world, but that which feels through muscles, tissues, and a complex web of interconnected systems within that constantly respond to external stimuli around us, experiences, tastes, smells, touch, sight, perhaps. Systems of power, systemic racism, heteropatriarchy, colonialism, capitalism. So in Teaching to Transgress, Bell Hooks reflects on the possibility of teaching outside the frameworks of white masculinist patriarchal disembodiment. So many already in the Pedagogies of Care thread in this conference have drawn on Bell Hooks' work in Teaching to Transgress to discuss her approach of feminist pedagogy of care that sees teacher as healer. And Jennifer Musial does such a beautiful job talking about this in both the yoga studio and the classroom, and you can see her work in my bibliography. But I want to situate Hooks' framing, as Musial does, specifically grounded by and grounded in meditation and mindfulness work from one of her teachers, Vietnamese Buddhist monk, Thich Nhat Hanh. For Hooks, Thich Nhat Hanh offered, quote, a way of thinking about pedagogy which emphasized wholeness, a union of mind, body, and spirit, end quote. In part influenced by Hahn's emphasis on wholeness, Hooks argues that to move from disembodiment means to affirm the sensual, the sensorial, the affective. She writes, quote, we are called to learn beyond the boundary of language, of words, where we share common understanding. We are called to learn from our senses, from our feeling states, and find their ways of knowing, so that an insurrection of subjugated knowledge may occur. Offering students and ourselves tools to feel systems of power opens a radical future for feminist pedagogy centered on care. I also find important lessons and paths for how to cultivate this kind of feminist pedagogy of care through Audre Lorde's concept of the erotic. The erotic for Lord is a sense of deep pleasure and joy, which in her words, quote, we begin to demand from ourselves and from our life pursuits, that they feel in accordance with that joy and which we know ourselves to be capable of, end quote. Lord's erotic calls for affective and somatic knowledge, grounded in the internal sense of satisfaction. She writes that, quote, the erotic is not a question of only of what we do, it is a question of how acutely and fully we can feel in the doing, end quote. The erotic is the deepest form of knowledge we have, a form of knowledge of the possibilities and conditions of joy. For Lord, this way of feeling provides a path to liberation outside of masculine structures, as you see here in the quote I have. She writes, the white fathers told us, I think, therefore I am. The Black mother within each of us, the poet whispers in our dreams, I feel, therefore I can be free. So driven by a desire to not just teach Lord's work on the erotic, but to help my students feel it, I decided to incorporate yoga into my teaching. I had always wanted to teach yoga in my WGS classes. I did my teacher training while I was a graduate student. It's been so central to my time as a teacher. But I didn't, because I was afraid of how my colleagues, students, and administrators would interpret my pedagogy. As a young queer scholar who worked for years as an adjunct in BAP, a visiting assistant professor, it's my first year on the tenure track, I didn't feel like I had enough power or clout in the university to try this queer approach to the classroom. And perhaps I still don't, but here it is. And yet for me, teaching and practicing yoga are my spaces of the erotic in Lord's sense of the word. I find such deep and authentic joy in teaching both yoga and women's and gender studies, yet often feel like I have to keep each in their own separate spaces between mind and body. So I began incorporating yoga in my WGS classroom during the pandemic, because as we all witnessed, there was such a deep need for strategies, tools, and possibilities for healing at a time of such uncertainty and instability, and opening with institution of higher education for more creative and applied methods of care. I saw yoga in the classroom as a tool to allow students to feel their way through the pandemic and to understand these feelings as sites of knowledge and learning. When we feel sad, depressed, society often tells us these are our own individual problems of which we need to work or think ourselves out of. A queer, feminist, and anti-racist perspective, of course, reminds us that this is the work of systems of power we live under and their material manifestations in our bodies and psyches. Bringing yoga and its practices of introspection and feeling, which are often presented in neoliberal individualist frameworks of wellness, to the WGS classroom, which insists on connecting the personal to the political and institutional, provides, I think, liberatory potentials to feel power and cultivate tools of resistance. So I'd like to take some time here to discuss what exactly it is I mean by yoga, because this matters for how I teach it in the classroom. So on one hand, it's a practice grounded, or it's both, I should say, not on one hand, it is both a practice grounded in Hindu, Buddhist, and Jaina spiritual traditions and philosophies, with a focus on the union between mind, body, heart, and breath. It is also an asana or postural style of yoga that I teach in my classrooms called yin or restorative, which focuses on the breath and gentle movements. So while some in the US might associate yoga with an exercise regime, especially seeing yoga as a physical practice of asana or postures, yoga is also a spiritual and philosophical practice. The Yoga Sutras, written by Indian sage Patanjali in approximately 400 CE, frame yoga as a strategy for discovering the state of wholeness that already exists within us, and for how we can begin to understand the letting go of our suffering. The path of yoga, according to Patanjali and as practiced in Ashtanga yoga, has 8 limbs. Postures is just the posture or asana are just one. So I'm going to spend a little time talking about the first limb, the yama, and the first 2 tenets of the first limb, ahimsa and satya. But there are 8 limbs, right? And here you see here all of them. And again, the body, the movement of the body, and the breath are just one little slice of this overall framework. And so the first teaching of the first limbs is ahimsa, or non-harming. The yama offers teaching of compassion and radical tenderness in our relationship to the world around us, but also ourselves. Before anything else then, yoga must begin with ahimsa. And it's with this approach that I began teaching restorative and yin yoga in the classroom. And so this is an image, actually, we're very lucky at my institution to have opened this semester what's called a mindfulness room, and I could talk more about that in the Q&A. So this is an image from one of my classes, and all the students were fine with me sharing this, of them doing yin yoga. It's really a beautiful space, and I'm so lucky to have access to it. So yin and restorative yoga are slower styles of yoga focused on stretching, meditation, and relaxation, and help to stimulate the parasympathetic nervous system, part of the involuntary nervous system that supports rest and recovery. Yin yoga involves holding poses from anywhere from 1 to 5 minutes. It often includes the use of props, as you see here with the straps, to make the poses more accessible, but it doesn't have to. And it's really targeting the connective tissue, fascia, ligaments, and joints. And restorative yoga is similar to yin yoga. It's a very restorative kind of practice without any kind of stretching as a goal. So in restorative, it's about deep diaphragmatic breaths, often practiced with bolsters, but it can be done without them as well. So yin and restorative yoga are especially potent when taught through a trauma-informed framework. Trauma-informed yoga understands that trauma lives in the body, not just in the mind. It also understands trauma in complex ways. Not just in terms of singular traumatic events, but that in which the mind, body, heart responds to the systems of power and the experiences of microaggression that we negotiate daily under racism, cissexism, heteropatriarchy, ableism, and settler colonialism. Trauma-informed yoga empowers its practitioners to understand themselves and their bodies as their own best teachers. And so when taught from a trauma-informed lens, these formations of yoga are really radical practices of somatics that invite practitioners inwards, towards deep introspection, to feel their bodies and the world around them, to invite the potency of a pause. I think this is so important for so many students who rarely take time to pause, breathe, and feel. I know we have a bunch of students here today, so what do you think? Do you take time to pause, breathe, and feel throughout the day? I'd hope you do. For a really interesting book about some ways that trauma-informed restorative yoga can be used in relation to racism and to heal from racism, you can see Gail Parker's book, which I also have here and in my bibliography. And so my experience really teaching yoga in the classroom developed throughout the pandemic. And thanks, Carla just shared the slides again, and if you wanted to see these slides or a link to the syllabus, so I've offered you the full syllabus here. So preparing for fall 2021 classes for mine and my students' first time back in the classroom since our classes went online in fall 2020, and with the opportunity to teach on any topic for a department senior seminar, I decided to offer a class entitled Feminist Theories, Politics, and Practices of Care. The class engaged with care through intersectional and interdisciplinary frameworks to analyze care in various formations: care of the self, care as labor, care as method, and care as embodied. The class also traced the ways in which care, especially self-care, has been co-opted by neoliberal institutions in ways that and capitalist formations, excuse me, by corporations to maximize work efficacy, by the wellness industry, and by self-help frameworks in ways that empty it of its feminist content. So I incorporated various methods of mindfulness and meditation and trauma-informed restorative yoga in the class so that I wasn't just teaching about care, but modeling it as an individual and collective practice. I often open with 5-minute body scans, similar to what we did at the start of class, or I even taught full yin and restorative classes, both online and in the meditation room. After each class, students would complete part of their work was a journal to reflect and then to share with each other. And this is really a way of them just being in their body. And so my use of yoga in the class was also partly inspired by my use of yoga and meditation earlier in the pandemic when I was teaching online at the end of spring 2020. Feeling the stress of my students and myself, because we spent so much time, as we all experienced, sitting in front of computers, and this has been a wonderful conference, right? But it's a long time to sit in front of a computer. I wanted to offer my students space and time to pause and to feel. So I posted a recorded video of me guiding the session, and many of them in my eval said it was their favorite part of the class. And I think it is an important site to learn, not something that was just tacked on. And so when I later shifted to synchronous online teaching, I would often open the class also with a short meditation and movement exercise. So it wasn't just in the care seminar where I brought this to the WGS classroom. I hope that these short moments of pause and introspection would provide my students and myself a momentary sanctuary in the virtual classroom, during which we could return to our bodies outside of the Zoom University's panoptical disciplinary gaze. Attempt to sit in the few comforts offered by synchronous pandemic learning, coming to class in slippers, sweatpants, with our cats on our laps, dogs at our side, perhaps legs crossed, our bodies perhaps more free to sit and be as they disappeared from view amongst our floating heads in the Zoom boxes. So while I see yoga and meditation as practices with truly liberatory potentials in the classroom, I also want to sit with the messiness of the entanglements of power that subtend these practices. Health, including mental health, is part of what, according to Barbara Ehrenreich, becomes a moral imperative in our society as part of the governmentality and disciplining of citizen subjects under neoliberalism, which demands us as individuals to constantly seek self-improvement and maximization. In this way, it is all too easy for neoliberalism, or perhaps more specifically, the neoliberal university, and this is why I want to get back to the meditation room, to co-opt the work of yoga and the focus of self-care really for the purpose of individualizing responsibility and exonerating structures and institutions like the university. Part of sitting with this messiness then, I think, is to teach students, as I did in my care seminar, about the radical histories and potentials of care, and to also help them think about the way that self-care can be deployed towards individualist ends, or could be used to build collective liberation as part of a feminist, decolonial, and queer commitment towards futurity. Teaching yoga in the classroom is also a practice entangled in the trappings of neocolonialism and Orientalism. In the US and West more broadly, yoga is often taught either in ways that are whitewashed, stripped of its Hindu origins and Indian roots, or exoticized and fetishized. So teaching yoga in ways that, as Susanna Barkataki, American Indian yoga teacher and author, encourages, embraces yoga's roots, drawing on and teaching yoga not just as a postural practice, but honoring the philosophies of the practice, I think, is one way to work towards ahimsa, the non-harming, and satya, the truth of the practice. But I do still think it falls into what Rumia Pucha calls somatic Orientalism, and you see her definition here, a form of Orientalism that, quote, encourages certain kinds of emotional, psychological, and spatialized attachments to a range of sensory experiences, sight, sound, taste, smell, touch, from formerly colonized areas and their cultural religious practices, and markets these as wellness activities, which can function as healing elixirs for the ills of Western life, or the neoliberal university amidst a pandemic, in my words. So I understand these neoliberal and Orientalist colonial contexts as a white queer settler, and I don't pretend to be free of this complex web of power, but I do think that women's and gender studies offers this tool to sit in the messiness and open up towards more decolonial frameworks. And so I will let you read the quote on your own here, but I'm really inspired by Yumara Figueroa's framework of decolonial love, really bearing witness to the past while being open to a future that really sits with the power of coloniality. I know our session's over soon, so I'm just going to try to wrap up a little quicker here and leave some time for questions. So as you have questions, you might start thinking about them and putting them into the chat. So although yoga is often practiced in ways that might be cost inaccessible, done in places that are sizist or sexist, I think it still can be a powerful tool. Offering these kind of practices, I think, makes yoga accessible to students. A lot of students who I teach yoga to have never done these kind of meditation or movement practices before. And I have a lot of students who are first generation, who are trans, who are queer, and they don't feel comfortable going to a traditional yoga studio. And so I don't have time to read everyone's testimonial, so I'll put this one up and you can read it on your own. I'll read one more. But one student for my care seminar reflected on the experience of meditating during class, saying, I was often stressed throughout the semester, but Dr. Diamond-Lenow's meditations always allowed me a sense of relief. We as students can find ourselves in a routine of stress, class, and assignments, and we often don't take moments to breathe and focus our mental and emotional health. The meditations and movement with Dr. DL gave me the moment to be within myself and reconnect with myself physically, mentally, and emotionally. So again, I don't have time to read this one on the screen, but here the student speaks on how, as a first generation Latinx migrant who started college fall 2020, doing yoga and meditation in my classes from a feminist perspective allowed her, in conjunction with work from our WGS classroom to challenge her sense of an imposter syndrome and to find her own place in the university. So since offering these practices in my classes, I've been approached by a lot of students, a lot of student groups, and a lot of other faculty asking me to also lead sessions for their classes or their groups. I've done it for CAMP, College Assistance Migrant Program, the GSRC, Gender Sexuality Resource Center, and within different WGS spaces. And so I think that women of color feminist pedagogies invite us back to our mind, heart, and bodies. And yoga offers the tools to move into and from our bodies, hearts, and minds. This kind of embodied knowledge and practice and care is central to building more just and liberatory feminist futures, individually and collectively, and in and outside the WGS classroom. So thank you so much. My apologies if that was a little rushed at the end. I did want to take questions and also maybe just do a 1-minute meditation. Here are some of my sources, and you can see these a little bit more in my bibliography. So I don't see, okay, I do see a question. So I'll take questions, and then if we have time, I'll close us out with a meditation. I'll leave us with 1 minute to go for that. So I see someone asked, are there ways for teachers who aren't trained in yoga to incorporate some of these ideas of care and bodily awareness in the classroom? I think this is a great question. And this is something I was thinking about. Like, yes, I've been trained in this. I have my 500-hour certification. And I think we can all ask people to pause and to feel. I think that's really powerful. And I think there's also, that's something really important in inviting practitioners, especially practitioners of color, to classrooms. I've seen a lot of openings in terms of institutional money that people are just ready to pour into care work. And so I think finding those teachers of color in your community, finding those queer and trans teachers is one way that we don't have to be the only ones to do it. And there's so many options to, I think, learn about these practices too, and even maybe to get your institution to pay you to do like a mindfulness training. I do think there's this opening, but I recognize, yeah, we don't all come from the same place, but I don't think we all have to be trained yoga teachers to still call into the body. So thank you for that question. Thank you so much, for this question. I don't have quantitative data from this. I am just really starting this work, to be honest. I am still working on turning my dissertation into a book, which is about race, sex, and species in the war on terror. But I was so tired, honestly, of just looking at what's wrong in this world and wanted to dream of other kind of collective futures. So this is beginning work, and I hope to share more. I can't run through decolonial love more because I don't have the time, but it's in the bibliography if you're interested. Essentially, it's a way of just honoring the past that we inherit and really sitting in the messiness of colonial power relations and thinking of decolonization and really deep structural frameworks. And someone's asked, do I have any recommendations for finding inclusive in-person yoga that aren't appropriative? Yeah, I mean, there's such a beautiful way that people have opened into virtual yoga teaching during the pandemic. One slide I will share really quickly actually is from a group called the Trans Yoga Project. And I think they do this really beautiful work of holding space for folks. There's a lot of online folks or online spaces for BIPOC only meditation spaces. I love the Trans Yoga Project because they call in this intersectional framework that honors the need to work towards decolonization. And they do have meditations that are free. So I think YouTube is a great source. Following the Trans Yoga Project is a great source. I teach for the Queer Gym, which I think actually has its own problems. I won't go into that. So I am happy to share my bibliography. Someone, Beatrice, asked. I actually shared it in the script of my talk, so you'll have full access to it if you want to get that Google link that Carla has just put into the chat. And I know we only have 1 minute left, so really quickly, if you would, with me, let's close out together with some collective breaths. So I'd like you to close your eyes and just begin to rub your palms together. And as you rub your palms together, feel this heat, this fire, and then take your palms to your face, and then drop your face down to your palms. So really, it's this way of taking a moment to burn past all that you've seen in my presentation, to, instead of zooming out, looking at the email, the to-do list, to remind yourself to zoom back inwards. And then again, take your hands and rub them together. And then take your hands on top of your heart, one hand on top of the other. Close your eyes and bow your head. We'll close with a collective breath in this collective heart work. Strength really is a shared sigh. So as you inhale again, a full breath to low belly, to side ribs, to chest, to throat, hold it in. And then open mouth, audible sigh out, release it all out. Yeah, then you can open your eyes again, maybe keeping your hand at heart. You can turn back your video on and wave at each other again. And thank you all so much for participating, for thinking, for feeling. I am happy to take any questions that you have. I'll throw my email into the chat. And thank you so much. This is like my life. My heart is just so full. Again, I never thought I could, at a conference, teach yoga. So thank you, thank you, thank you. And I'm throwing my email to the chat. Feel free to put in any last reactions. And I know we got to wrap up because Stephanie is going to go host our next session. So
this was amazing. Obviously, we need an hour next year. Thank you so much, Chloe. This was a great way to start the day. Thank you to our participants. We have another session starting in like 14 minutes. The whole day is more practitioner, hands-on, performance-based. So there's a really great lineup. I threw the Zoom link in there. I'm going to hop over there right now, and we'll see everybody in a couple minutes. And thank you again, Chloe. This was amazing. It was really a wonderful way to start the day. So thank you for your time.
Thank you all. Thanks.